What do we say about sounds that manage to scare us without cheap parlor tricks, without resorting to petty tactics like sudden loud noises, without relying solely on their accompanying visuals? Do we call these things truly horrifying?
Absolutely.
The Silent Hill 2 soundtrack by Akira Yamaoka is, without a shadow of a doubt, one of the most masterfully crafted horror soundtracks ever created. It's genuinely disturbing, and in the context of Silent Hill, it's just... It has this beautiful balance between compositional theory and it blends elements of rock, experimental, industrial, and it's all the more impressive when you take a look at what makes it tick. Put most simply, Silent Hill 2 is a game about a town covered in fog. When James gets a letter from his wife, who died 3 years ago, asking him to come to the town, things get real freaky real quick. Fundamentally, Silent Hill is a survival horror game, placing heavy emphasis on ambience and atmosphere. And let's just get one thing straight. Silent Hill is... It's a bit weird, and its soundtrack carries on that tradition of weirdness and quirk, and being on the edge of something palatable by any consumer, and in the middle of being in complete it's a contemplative, claustrophobic, meandering, gloomy, smothering, wonderful soundtrack. And it's not just weird, it's bonkers, nuts, to the wall crazy. To people who don't consume horror often, downright terrifying. Looking past the excellence in composition, there are a few devices at play that make this soundtrack so effective, in my opinion. One of my absolute favorite elements at work is how cacophonous Yamaoka is able to make everything sound while still preserving a consistent beat. For example, listening to a lot of these songs your first time through, you might instinctively just want to call them a disjointed mess of sounds, and this makes the listener uncomfortable, unsure of how to feel the pulse of the music. But if you listen closer, you'll find that these songs have a rhythm and a beat after all. This rhythmic ambiguity is one of the elements in Yamaoka's arsenal, because rhythmic ambiguity causes a sense of disorientation, which can lead to a lot of musical tension. Pretty uncomfortable, isn't it? We're teased with the prospect of safety and stability in a secure rhythm, but just like an emotionally stunted and ambivalent chihuahua, Yamaoka just, nah. Then he starts pulling these next level mind games by scattering some very repetitive atmospheric tracks here and there. They're super calm, super steady beat, super meditative, and they lull you into a sense of focus. Eventually you start to tune out the songs like you do with all repetitive things, until suddenly things start sounding like demo tracks for Iridescence, and you snap back to reality like... The tracks don't sit still. They shift rapidly and sporadically and unpredictably, and it happens so often and at seemingly random intervals to the point where you don't know what to expect, and you're always with this sense of unease. This contributes to the overall sense of restlessness and melancholia of the soundtrack. And sometimes you get to the point where you think something is supposed to happen with a musical climax, and it doesn't. After all, some of the strongest horror is the horror that doesn't come at all. When there's rising tension that leads to a lack of resolution, it can feel awkward, jarring, and uncomfortable. For example, when you were a kid in primary school and you did something you knew you shouldn't have done, and you saw your teacher seeing you do it, and instead of punishing you, they just stare at you from their desk, and you know the punishment is coming. You feel it, but it never comes. And suddenly you're on your knees in front of the whole class, yelling at the top of your child lungs, begging for mercy and forgiveness, but for the grace of God, Miss Fletcher, I'm sorry I stole that apple. And so the soundtrack basically makes you become James, creating your own Pyramid Head in the real world, begging to be punished. Because if Pyramid Head is a manifestation of James' desire to be punished for killing his wife, then playing Silent Hill 2 is your desire for something to actually happen to you while you're listening to this soundtrack that seems like it's always leading you to the brink of something, but almost never coming. Look, what I'm trying to say here is that this soundtrack mirrors themes of the actual game you're playing, which only adds to its depth in my opinion. And yet, behind all the horror, some of the tracks in this soundtrack are just momentously beautiful. Of course, it maintains its melancholic and somber tone throughout, but some of the songs on this soundtrack are nothing short of enchanting. We also bounce between some rock and grunge tracks, a big source of inspiration for Yamaoka. You would think that with such huge jumps in style, this soundtrack just wouldn't work, and yet it does by preserving the same tone and droning qualities of the other tracks. Although they shouldn't, these cuts just fit in with everything else like a perfectly shaped puzzle piece. And if anything, it just kind of contributes to the mysticism that surrounds this soundtrack. I can't see this soundtrack being made in any other timeline. Just the sheer cosmic forces required to produce such a strange and bizarre mishmash of sounds. For a game soundtrack, it's so weird that how it ever even saw the light of day is a mystery to me. Not that I'm complaining, but it does boggle me. And you have to think that at some point, some person thought all of this up. Now that's talent. Although uncomfortable, terrifying, and dark, this is a soundtrack that's crafted with all the grace, delicacy, and beauty of any other thoughtful piece of art. Hell, I'd even call Yamaoka a virtuoso. No cheap tricks, no sudden loud noises. Just pure audio horror. Hi, thank you for watching my video. Hope you enjoyed it. You know me, just reclining back in my chair again, listening to the new Anderson .Paak single that just dropped. Pure fire, by the way. Anyways, I'm sorry this video took so long. I got completely slammed by life, and this video also took a long time. So, yeah. Alright. Anyways, see you later. Goodbye.